Hello, everyone. We are back again with another episode of Coliving Innovators Podcast. This time we have our very own Gui Perdrix with us. This is a little bit different than the general conversation we have. It's more about both of us having a conversation on what we are doing and what we are building at Art of Co, how we are building it, what are the intentions, how we came to this point, what has been our evolution, and then why we think co-living and community living is the future. What are the signs that we have seen while speaking to more than 200, 300 co-living operators in last 5, 10 years? For me, it's been a decade. For Guy, it's been more than 6 years now in the co-living ecosystem. Welcome, Guy. So I think you don't need an introduction. Everybody knows you. You have written the only book in the co-living ecosystem, the first book, which was the Art of Coliving book. You have been the president of Coliv. You have founded Art of Co, and you have done so many things. Like I think if I start listing them down, our podcast will get over by then. So I'll leave it to you. Welcome to this conversation. I think we'll have a lot of fun, a lot of insights into your mind of what you are thinking about co-living and how you are thinking about it. So welcome to this episode.
Thank you, Mayank. Thank you. And I'm very glad that you're hosting this, and I'm really curious how this conversation will be going, because we're talking every day, and we talk a lot. So let's go.
Perfect. Cool. So okay, let's start with the rapid fire, right? I have a list of questions that I've written here.
Sure.
What I want you to do is not think too much about it and just say the first thing that comes to your mind. I want to make it a fun segment. I want people to start with a little bit of a smile on their face, and then we'll get into something serious. Cool? All right, so I'll start. The most inspiring community you have visited?
Okay, tricky one. You sent me this question beforehand, and I was like, fuck, what is the most inspiring community? First thing that came to my mind, Experience House. 1 month co-living, very intense, super well thought through. I'm going to leave it there.
Okay. What's the most essential feature of a successful co-living space?
I think it's having founders that know what they're doing, and founders that want to build something sustainable long term. Because if you don't have that, all of the rest is gonna
Cool.
Doesn't matter actually.
Co-living in city or co-living in countryside?
Both.
Okay. The biggest mistake that you made as a co-living operator?
The biggest mistake that I made as a co-living operator.
That you remember?
It's a good one. I mean, there were a lot, but the biggest mistake I made was actually not getting myself out of operations, and that started being very heavy after a certain time, like being the one that's actually not only the founder but also the community manager and the one who's doing operations, etc. And if I were to do it again, I would find another structure to run this co-living with somebody else that can help with operations, or by involving the residents way more.
Okay. If you had to summarize co-living in one word, what that would be?
Fuck, there's 2 words coming up. Shared living. But if it's one word, then I would say experience.
Okay.
Like rich human experience.
What was your favorite community building event when you were an operator?
Actually, as an operator, my favorite community event was super simple. It was just food. We had a weekly dinner, and everybody would it was a potluck, so everybody would just cook and
very interesting, because I just had a conversation and the other person said the exact same thing, that breaking a bread every Friday together with people you were living with was the most interesting piece of community building event.
Yeah.
All right. And what's more important, design or community management?
Community management, even though the design impacts quite a bit how the community functions. Okay. But the issue is this: if you have good design but no community management, you're not guaranteed to have a community. But if you have, let's say, very poor design, let's say that, for example, all of the spaces are very far away from each other and the living room is in the basement or something, well, then you can still, with good community management and good community facilitation, you can still kind of tackle these problems and figure out solutions together.
Interesting. Favorite city for co-living innovation?
New York City.
Interesting.
But
If
I'm
you
not
could
so
launch a co-living space anywhere in the world, where you would do that?
I would do it in Lisbon. I live here and we need more co-living spaces.
Interesting. Right. One piece of advice, the best advice that you have already given to some co-living operator. What has been your secret best advice?
So that's an advice that actually comes up only in times of urgency, when things are not going well. But the advice is actually be close to your residents. Like, there were several cases where co-living operators were struggling. For example, during COVID time, there was this one company where 70% of their residents got actually laid off. They couldn't pay anymore, so it was like a big hustle. And the one thing that just needed to be done was going on a Facebook Live every day and just being there for the residents and talking things out. So what I'm saying is because it's a piece of advice that sounds like very, very normal or very like not thought through, but actually as soon as you start scaling up, you lose touch with your residents. And I think it's important to spend time there, and maybe even as a co-living founder, spending like a couple of days a year in your co-living space and experiencing it.
Yeah, because the more closer you are to your residents, the better the product can become over a period of time. Because once you start scaling, the time you spent on other things becomes a lot more than what you spend with your end users. I think that's a value add for any company, whether it's co-living or otherwise.
Yes, and that goes back. Yes, and that goes back. I mean, we've seen, for example, I'm not sure if these are the good examples, but for example, like being like close to customers, doing like customer-driven innovation or product innovation, right? It has been like a theme that's come up since the 80s, 90s, now in companies. Now, for example, like user research is super important. People like value it because they know that you want to create a product that's being desired by people, right? And the only way to know that is to understand what do people desire. And once you launch your product, you want to have feedback as quickly as possible.
So I'll follow up on the same line of thought, right? Do you think that in the current co-living ecosystem, there's a lack of user research that's happening? There's not enough user research happening in the co-living ecosystem today?
It's a good question. Yeah, I would say so. Simply because I haven't seen any good user research out there. I'm sure that some companies are doing user research. I know that in PBSA, there are some companies who have like more than 5,000 beds that do in-depth user research, and they find out really valuable stuff. For example, there's one company shared a report with me where they, for example, realized that actually a lot of people like lights behind the mirrors, just because, like, especially for women when you get ready and stuff, but it's a very nice feature to have. So small things like this, I think, could actually, like, really understanding what are like the small details that people want would be interesting, and I haven't seen a really good report on that.
Very, very interesting. So something of a gap which one of us can pick up from whoever is listening. Cool. You spoke about a minute before you spoke about customer-driven innovation, right?
Yeah.
Can you expand a bit on it from a co-living perspective? What a customer-driven innovation can look like possibly in the co-living ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, look, give you a couple of examples. When I was operating like a digital nomad space, meaning like it was a nomadic co-living space. We would only stay for like 3 months in one location. So we had, for example, our residents vote on where to go next, and that would help us to decide where to go, right? So when you're building a co-living space, you can involve your residents or your future residents in creating that. When Urban Campus was building the first space in Madrid, they did a whole weekend or at least one day workshop with future residents to understand what type of spaces do they want, what would they like to do with that space, what type of community roles, etc. So customer-driven innovation really means that like you don't have to do crazy market research in order to start a co-living space, because most probably it's going to get filled either way. We're talking about housing, and that's a primary need. But by building up your brand before you launch, and by involving residents in decision-making processes, especially like in terms of design, architecture, events, you can just create a better product. And I guess, yeah, maybe one thing, like the way I see this customer-driven innovations the most is when it comes to actually community management. So community management has to be done with residents. Ultimately, like, you want to actually have events and activities that residents want, right? So you have to do surveys all the time, and you have to actually like even involve residents all the time.
So I recently did a poll on LinkedIn, kept it open for about 2 weeks, on how much like how many times a co-living operator takes feedback.
Yes.
And it was very surprising that like most of the people, about 88% of the people said like 2 times or 3 times a year. And that was very sad to understand, because every customer touch point is a potential innovation waiting to happen. If we figure out a systemic way to take feedback at every touch point, whether it's during the curation phase or the booking phase or the onboarding phase or the living phase or even the moving out phase, right? Any phase of a customer resident journey, there are so many touch points that are happening. And if we just figure out a way to get feedback on each of those touch points, imagine the consumer insights we will generate in order to improve our experiences, and ultimately the business will kind of skyrocket. I think one of the examples that I often quote is Casa Mia Co-Living. They do NPS survey. They publish their learnings like very transparently. You can look at their last, I think they have published about 12 or 13 NPS surveys of their residents so far. And they're building it like in open. Like a lot of us can learn so much from them on how to involve people in order to build better co-living spaces, better experiences. Cool.
Actually,
Thanks a lot.
On your LinkedIn post where you did the poll, you originally mentioned some completely different numbers on top. Because you said like you did the poll in our private WhatsApp group, or I'm not sure where you did it. Yes.
You
did a poll, and that poll said that most people do not do surveys. And then on the public voting, most people said like they do surveys. So, but knowing operators myself, I know that the majority of them do not send out surveys 2 or 3 times a year. So my guess is that actually most operators do not send many surveys at all.
Yeah. So I think that's one thing that people can start doing a lot more, because I think if this industry has to continue to grow with a right kind of approach, with a win-win for all stakeholders, I think listening to all of them, bringing them on a design table is really, really important. And I think if you look at any industry, whether it's e-commerce, whether it's D2C, end users have changed the way the industries have functioned primarily, which we have not seen happening in the co-living ecosystem yet. But I think we are moving in that direction, because with the current graveyards that we have seen with larger scale operators, right, and we have a lot of learnings from there. I think people are now understanding the need of keeping customer at the center of the ecosystem and then building around them. So,
yeah.
Very, very interesting. All right. So I want us to kind of take a step back, Guy, and talk about, I would love to know, like, I know I've listened to your story in bits and pieces a lot, and we have spoken about it a lot, but why did you came into co-living? Why did you started operating spaces? You did like 3 or 4 spaces in Bali, in Mexico. Why did you do them? Like, what was your intention? Like, was your intention money or finances behind it? Was your intention to meet new people, create experiences? What was your inherent motivation to get into the co-living ecosystem? And then how did you first came to that point that, okay, no, I will start this? Because again, I'll just give you a little bit of context why I'm asking this question to you, because a lot of people that we talk to at Art of are either conceptualizing or thinking about starting a co-living space. So it'll be good to know what went through your mind. It was a different time, but it's always good to understand, and I think people can learn a lot from it. So,
I mean, look, it's interesting because, so to put it back in context, the first time I heard about co-living was in 2015. And a friend of mine, or not a friend, an acquaintance, somebody that I met, he was this entrepreneur that was traveling around Europe with his bike. He called it the Startup World Tour. And then like in December, he was stuck in Budapest and it was like snowing. And then he created this 1 month Airbnb co-living for entrepreneurs. And I loved it so much. I loved the idea so much. I wasn't able to attend. And then like talking to him, like we just created this vision of how cool would it be to have these different co-living houses around the world, and us as digital nomads, we can find a home everywhere with community. So that's when I first heard about co-living, and then 2 years later, in 2017, when I first created my co-living, it was kind of by luck or chance, and the main motivation at that time was actually finances. It was a time where I was going to Barcelona, I was attending a 1 month event. I didn't have that many finances, Barcelona was expensive, and then with my friend we figured out that a lot of the participants of that 1 month event were looking for housing, right? So we're like, oh, okay, cool. This way at least we can maybe subsidize our rent or not pay that much. Turns out that this month was one of the most powerful months ever. And then, so the reason why I continued co-living was not because of finances, but it was because of the lifestyle. And we just invited at the beginning actually friends of friends, right? So it was very organic. And in co-living, that's where I learned, I mean, look, in this 1 month in Barcelona, that's where for the first time I heard about the concept of self-love. I got introduced to meditation, to psychedelics, to finances. I mean, I haven't experienced life in such a nourishing and way. So that was my desire to continue co-living. And doing this for 2 years, and then after that I realized that, like, look, co-living has been so far the most transformative and eye-opening experience of my life, and I believe that other people deserve to experience that as well. And so that's what guided me into then working with other operators, and you know, like, even if I stopped running officially co-living spaces since 2019, like I was still living in co-living. Sharing spots with my friends or attending other retreats, and right now it's funny because now in the last like 2 years I entered a different phase, got my own place, now living with my partner, but there's a part of me that wishes that now I could have a different type of co-living, you know, like maybe my own apartment, but like having my friends live upstairs and downstairs and we all share this like condominiums. That'd be beautiful.
So you kind of had like a Airbnb moment with which they had with cereals when they created a lot of cereals and then sold them. So you wanted to solve your finances. You ended up creating a concept which you liked, and then you choose that as a lifestyle going forward. Really interesting story. I have a little bit of a different story because when I came for my first job in the Silicon Valley of India, which is Bangalore, I couldn't find a place where I had people with similar mindset, and I had to wait for 3 months. Just kept staying here and there in hotels, in paying guest situations. It took me 3 months to find a decent space. Like, at that point of time, I decided, okay, I want to create something where if young people are coming in away from home, they get a good place in a decent budget, and that was the genesis of me creating my own co-living space. So it was not financial at all. It eventually I left my job and started doing this full time when the time was right and when the finances were right. But the need or the intention was to solve my own problem, which eventually became a very big company. Cool. That's really, really interesting, Guy. All right. So now that you learned about co-living in 2015, you did this stint, you started various co-living spaces in different parts of the world. What led to what led to Colive, or what led to you writing the Art of Coliving book? What was your inspiration, and what was the process? If you can take us through the process of why you created Art of Coliving, and with what mindset? I think a lot of times people see books written just from a knowledge transfer perspective, but I sense that for you it was a lot more than that. So I would love to know, and I've not asked you this in any of our other conversations, so I just
No, you
want to know it
haven't.
here.
I'm curious, what else do you think it was? You knowing me, what do you think it was?
I think it was more about spreading the word. It was more about, okay, I want to take all these my experiences of 200 other co-living founders, put them into a structure which is easily digestible to people, so that it can help people create more experiences. And it was not only because a lot of people write books from their knowledge. You wrote it from your knowledge plus 200 other people's knowledge, right? So there has to be an inherent motivation to go and talk to 200 people. I think it's not
I was
easy.
motivated.
Yeah?
I was just a big extrovert, Mayank, that's all.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, look, 2019, I was in Bali, and then I realized I want to dedicate the next 5 to 10 years of my life to co-living. I didn't say 5 to 10 years in my head, but for me it was like the next phase of my life is co-living. I want to help as many people to experience co-living. Then I made a choice. I was like, look, I have two options. Option number one is I become an operator. I mean, I already was an operator, but I'm going to grow as an operator. And then my estimate was like, in the next 5 to 10 years, I probably can impact around 10,000 people's lives. Knowing that I still have to learn a lot of things, including real estate, finances, team building, because I didn't really have proper experiences by then, and being a competitor to others, right? So I was like, okay, that sounds alright, but it sounds like a bit of hustle, and not the smartest approach. And then I was like, okay, what if I could work with operators and teach them knowledge, right? And this way improve not 10,000, but probably 100,000 people's lives. And that seemed to more align with me. So then I was looking around, and like one of the reason why I started this book was because it served a couple of things. Like, I don't know what exactly my main motivation was, but it was a mixture between learning, and I love interviewing people and learning from them. It was a mixture between creating something of value that people can use. And then the third thing is that it was also a way then for me to enter this industry. Because actually I was not part of the industry. I was operating, but I heard of, for example, Colive, the industry association, but never attended the events. Like, I wasn't part of the industry, so I had to become part of the industry. And so writing this book was for me a way to not only get known, but also get knowledgeable. I saw it kind of like my master's thesis, a PhD or something. And then, with the book came, while I was writing a book, for example, it was also when I launched my first newsletter. It was called the Coliving Cocktail at that time. And for example, I remember, man, like the first time that I was publishing a blog post, it took me like 3 weeks to click on the publish button, because I was like, is it good enough? Is it not good and stuff? Went out to like 50 people, and I was like, oh snap, now it's out. I was super stressed. And then from there, like started building out the newsletters and stuff. And the other thing that happened is that whenever I would interview people or go to a city, I would invite all of the founders to like a bar, bring them together. So that really helped to also build this community that eventually then became Colive. So yeah, and now look, as soon as the book came out, my thought was like, all right, now it's out, what's next? And now I'm like, how could I recreate the version, but maybe like only like 1/5 of the size, because I feel like it's really big, and most of the knowledge in the book is not mine. It's just like a bunch of people's thoughts and how they're doing stuff. So now I'm like, my inner critic is like, okay, the Art of Coliving V2 is probably going to be like a very practical, hands-on, 50-page checklist. Yeah.
Interesting. So I think now people know what you're going to work on next. The version 2 will come out soon. We will let you know, guys. But Thanks a lot for sharing that, Guy. But okay, so if you can take a minute again to take us through, okay, now the book happened.
Yeah.
You were consulting with various co-living operators in order to help them with community building strategy, growing their brand, scaling their brand. What led to the start of the incubator? Because I think that's the next big project that we took together. But I think there was still a 2 year gap in between of book coming out and then you starting something which was like in addition to the book, taking things to the next level. So what happened in these 2 years? What were your learnings that led you to start off an incubator?
Yeah. I mean, look, so I did this Co-Living World Tour in 2019, spent 2 years writing the book, came out in 2021. And then between 2021 and 2024, I've always wanted to launch Art of Co as an educational platform. So there was the book, and I was like, okay, the next thing is going to be the course, right? Or something that is more educative, something like cohort based. So that was always in my head. But the next couple of years, I didn't launch that because my focus was on working with operators, so doing a lot of advisory, a lot of consulting, and then building out Coliv. And then when you hit me up around like a year ago, and you said like, hey Guy, let's build out something together, it was the first time that actually I was like, okay, now I have the right support system to create something like that, right? So until 2024, look, we've both done a lot of consulting, a lot of advisory. I think this was another level of knowledge that I'm going to talk for myself, but that I personally acquired. Working sometimes for like 6 months with a company to implement the technology, you really understand how PMS works, launching a building of 1,000 people, etc. So, but then the final big product was still missing, and that one thing that would bring all of the knowledge together from the last years and all of the resources and the spreadsheets and the workshops wasn't there, right? So that led us to, in January, trying out the idea of this co-living incubator. And I think that now, 6 months in, so now we're like in August, September 2024, I think we found like a pretty good sweet spot of what we're offering. And to me, this co-living incubator is an equation made out of all of the knowledge that we acquired, like literally everything that's in the head, combined with mentorship, combined with advisory, and combined with being part of a group. So it's literally, I think to me personally right now, it feels like maybe the last big product that we're bringing out, but maybe not. Maybe it won't be. Maybe it's just the first out of many big ones. But yeah, it really feels like an accumulation, right? Or like getting to the end of this like 6-year journey of really learning and now finding a way to share that knowledge even more effectively.
Interesting. Thanks a lot again for sharing that. I think we've spoken about your journey right from 2015 to where we are today. A very, very interesting journey. I think now I want the next part of our conversation to kind of provide a little bit of golden nuggets for people, because so far we have spoken about our journey, why we are doing what we're doing, and I think that's great because it gives insights to people about our intentions, about what we are trying to do, what we're trying to achieve, and I think it should be known to people on where we are coming from and what we are trying to do, which is great. But now I want to move on to a little bit of, again, the knowledge side of, and pick your brains on certain topics, bring out certain golden nuggets and open your secrets a little bit. One of the things that I have personally kind of seen while working with more than 60-70 operators that I've worked with is this conversation around community, that what is community building, how we can do it, how we like, okay, when we are small we can still do a lot of things and it feels like a great community, but when we start scaling, things starts falling apart. So I would love to understand your thoughts on how can co-living be, like co-living community be built as we start growing, because now we have seen like the first 10 years of co-living ecosystem was about a lot of groundwork. Now a lot of brands are growing, and equally we are seeing a lot of brands are failing as well. So we have good brands that are growing profitably, and then we have other brands who have given us a lot of learnings, right? So what has been your learning from a perspective of building, let's say, like a co-living community for 500 people, 1,000 people, like for a larger set of people? How do you approach this? What are the frameworks that we should kind of pick from in order to go in this journey of doing community management at scale? So if you can share some thoughts on that.
Yeah, look, it's a very good question. It's a very good question because there was also the question that led me into co-living and writing the book, right? It was like, how can we combine community building and scaling up at the same time?
Right.
And I guess it's really hard to give one answer because there's so many different types of scenarios and different types of co-living spaces. My personal suggestion is that, or one personal, belief is that I think it's impossible to create a sense of community in buildings with more than 150 people. Or when I say community, means like the type of community that I experience, meaning you know everybody who's in the building, you know everyone's names, and you had time to hang out with everyone. If you don't have that, and if you create like larger communities, that's fine, but then there are several ways to do this. For example, you might not just take one building where you take several buildings of like 100 people each, and then okay, you can get to 300, 400, 500 units. Or you do build a large building, but you create several clusters, meaning you put, for example, like a living room on each floor, right, and creating these micro communities. I think that could work. And of course, you can also create interest-based communities. But my suggestion really is, I think it's great to scale, but you need to scale up the model that has worked for you. And what I'm seeing a lot is that co-living operators, they start maybe with a 10, 15 bedroom place, then they get their first building of 40 units, then they get a second building of 40 units, then they get a third one of 100 units, fourth one of 100 units, and then they get enough credibility because they have a track record now of more than 1,000 residents to do a partnership to do an 800 unit building. But actually what they're doing is they're building a completely new product. A 100 unit co-living has nothing to do with an 800 unit co-living. It's totally not the same experience. So for this, I'm a bit, like my personal suggestion would be like rather to scale up with the model that you've so far mastered instead of like scaling up something really big. And maybe here the one example I could mention is, I've been working closely with Coownership, it's a French co-living brand, and the founder behind Laurent Tassurek, he's also the one that founded ECLA, CLA, co-living of 1,100 units. And the living rooms were always empty. And for him, even though financially it worked, he was able to sell it to a French fund. Well, now his new project, Coownership, has a cap of 150 residents. So, yeah, my first advice here actually, or my first thought when hearing community at scale is that you can scale community, you can scale the feeling of community by having multiple communities. And then the question is like, how do you do that? And it's very hard to create this within a 1,000 unit building. It's much easier to create it within 10 buildings of 100 units each.
So that's a very interesting thing that you say that. I think it's the quote of the day that if you want to scale a community, scale it by building multiple communities, right? I think by design also we can help, even if it's a one large building, we can create micro communities of less than 150 people within that larger ecosystem and design the place in such a way that it helps us foster conversations in smaller micro communities, which is a part of a larger community. I think that's also something that people have tried and there have been a fair amount of success that I've seen with operators. So I want to ask you one controversial, like it's a controversial question and an opinion that a lot of people have, that communities do not help build real estate businesses, right? Do you agree with it? If yes, why? If not, why? Do you think community really adds value to a real estate business, and what we call co-living is something that is a future of living? What are your thoughts on that? Like, what are your raw thoughts on that?
My raw thoughts are this. If you're creating a co-living space, I'm pretty sure you can fill it up even if it's a very bad experience. Especially in big cities, right? I'm seeing here in Lisbon, there's some co-living providers that offer one room of 10 square meters for 1,100 euros a month, which to me is just blowing me away. But people still take it because you have foreign students that's coming here, or expats that don't have housing and they need something quick. But the truth is that real estate product is, to me, it's very sad. It's kind of sad because, like, you could have done so much better. And generally, I believe that the brands that are going to stay here long term are going to be the ones that do have good community, a good experience. And I don't know how you see it, but like for me, the notion that community doesn't create any value in real estate does not make sense. It's like saying having a strong followership for your product does not increase the value of your business. Of course it does. If you have people that love your product, then your business increases because they're going to buy it, right? So I do not actually understand that statement. At the same time, it's valid. It's valid because you can create a co-living space without community, and you're still probably going to be able to fill it up. But it's just going to suck, and you're going to have like 2-star ratings on Google, and you're going to be out of business soon. Or you're just not going to care, and you're just going to make profit from it. But I don't think that's the way to go, right? I think you need to desire to create a good experience and a good business, and you cannot create anything sustainable that's not good.
Right. I have a little bit of a nuanced kind of reaction to this statement whenever somebody asks me that, right? If you look at how we as humankind have evolved, the last 100 years of our evolution, there are kind of 3 or 4 mega trends that are happening around the world, right? So if you look at families are becoming smaller and smaller. They have never been so small. Like in the history of humankind, we have always had big families. Yeah. And we have lived in community. We have hunted in communities. Hunter-gatherers were like, it all started with community, right? But in the last 100 years, if I give you my example, my grandfather had about 11 siblings. My father had 5. I have 2, and I probably will have a single kid. So if you look at this, right, and I see this as a trend across, that the families are becoming smaller and smaller. Now, earlier, the need of community or the need of social interaction was fulfilled within the family, but now it is not getting fulfilled. It has increasingly become difficult to own a house. It was not like 20 years back. A person in between 25 to 30 years of age could easily get a house for his own, but now it is virtually impossible to get a house. That's another thing, as a trend that's happening around the world. It's housing prices around the world. You look at UK, what's happening in US, what's happening in Europe. It's all the same. You can call it with different names. You can give it different reasons, but I think in principle that's what's happening. And third thing is, in the last 25 years, we have created so much of like social media, the digital social media, that we are getting disassociated, or we stopped finding good in people, in meeting people face to face or having real conversations. On one hand, it helped us, you and me, sitting in different parts of the world, working together, co-founding a Art of Co platform, running an incubator, helping numerous co-living companies. That's the positive side of it. But the negative side of it is people in the same house talk on mobiles. now. Like if I go back to my hometown and I'm sitting with my family, I'm on the first floor, my parents are on the ground floor, rather than going and talking to them, I would just message them, and that's a sad reality. So if you stack these trends on each other, social isolation, families becoming smaller, not being able to rent a house, what it is trending towards, right? So we will continue to, the need of social interaction will not go away, right? We will still need a house to stay. If we cannot buy, we will rent. Now so we need, the future is of a type of housing which can provide you place on a rent, can help you with social interactions, and get you face to face with people, right? And if you look at what co-living is, it's like right at the center of these mega trends. Now, different people have different definitions of co-living, right? Today in one of our community, people were saying that, hey, this is not a co-living, this is a co-living. Right? Now, that's okay, but ultimately we come from different part of the world, different cultures, and we can have a different perception of what we understand as with the word co-living. But as a collective community, I think we need to move in a direction where we start kind of coming to a point where we start speaking the same language. Today, in any part of the world, if you say BTR, people will understand. If you say PBSA, people will understand. I think we are 10 years away from that happening in the co-living ecosystem, but we'll move towards that. Rather than pointing fingers, I think we should try and educate as many people as we can. But I think that's the reason co-living is the future of living. That's the reason community will more and more become an integral part of a real estate setup, because without that, the value of the real estate projects, if there are no great communities, will go down. I'll give you one example. So I used to live in a community where there were 2,000 families living. This was 1.5 years back. The cost of if you want to get one apartment in that particular community, the going rate around the area is about $300,000. But for that particular community, because it has, it's a huge community built and nurtured, and you just feel at home if you go there. And they have been able to do it at a scale of 2,000 families living in a single campus, and calling them that as a home, and having those relations with each other, having that safety, security, that peace of mind. The cost inside that community, just like 50 meters away from that, from the place which is 300,000, this is 750,000. And people are still buying in that community because they know that they will feel at home. They will understand, they need to have that connection in the place that they're living, and they're ready to pay that amount. So that's what's happening in the ecosystem, and that's why I feel whoever says that community is not a part of like real estate, I think they're mistaking it big time. And I think if there is a great community, the overall value gets so much better for everybody, for the person who is selling it, for the person who is renting it, for the person who is living, the landlord, the owner, the community, like the person who is built, the builder and the developer. It's a win-win for all stakeholders. So I think we are moving towards that direction, and that's why I see co-living as the future of housing. And I recently wrote about it in our Everything Co-Living newsletter that a lot of BTR and PBSAs are now moving towards and calling themselves co-living, and are now moving towards the co-living ecosystem, saying that, hey, we are a co-living, we're not a PBSA, and they're changing the way they operate and run. So that's happening in UK. There are real examples with it. So yeah, I think we are moving in that direction.
I like what you say, because like you're taking the approach of really thinking 5 to 10 years ahead, and actually it really marked me what you said, like your example of, for example, texting your grandparents when you're in the same house, right? It's true, and it's true that there's more and more people that now want to live a differently connected life, right? Like turn off your phone after 7 p.m. and just spend time with humans. And I think that you mentioned another thing, right? Rising real estate prices. personally, I believe that there's going to be one component that's going to join co-living, and that's co-ownership.
Fractional ownership or co-ownership, yeah.
Yes, like, because right now we are in the BTR sector, which is fine, meaning co-living is housing as a service. But usually, as a resident, I cannot buy into the building. And usually that's mainly it, right? And so ultimately, it's a temporary home. It's not a long-term home, and it's not a revenue-generating asset for the resident. So having residents being able to actually buy ownership in the real estate, I think is a piece that is missing. And I'm not saying that the ones that actually own the real estate have to live there. It can still be managed by the operator.
Right.
But opening up ownership to more people. And some co-living spaces have done it also with crowd equity and crowdfunding.
Right.
But I think that's one component that I hope will pick up in the co-living scene.
I'll give you one example. So there's a co-living place I visited. It's like 6 miles from where I currently stay. It's an investment property. So you, as an investor, cannot stay there. It will be managed by a professional co-living operator. It's a co-living space. It's constructed. It's a purpose-built co-living space. But I can buy 1, 2, or 3 units. Like one unit, like a 1 studio room or a 1 bedroom, like a 1 small bedroom apartment or a studio room within that overall building as an investment property, and then I get a 5% rental yield on a yearly basis out of it. I can buy 1, 2, or 3, or 4, or any kind number of units. That's how developers are now building business models around co-living, that you can have fractional ownership of the complete building, and an operator will operate, and you have to lease back. So it's a sale and lease back model that is now coming up, and I quite see it in a lot of places. I've seen it in Europe, I've seen it in India, I've seen it in Singapore happening. So
I've seen it a lot in Latin America too. Actually.
Right. Yeah. So I think this is one of the trends which are gonna pick up. While we're talking about trends, what are the other trends that you're seeing in the co-living ecosystem, Guy?
All right, top of my mind, I would say one, diversification of co-living. Like 5 years back, everybody was thinking co-living equals people who are 25 to 35. And nowadays, co-living operators are offering multi-generational co-living, like students with elderly, and also like elderly-only co-living, and normal multifamily. So you're seeing how, for example, even like let's take the example of Habit, right? And now they're offering co-living, but also like single studios, double studios. You're seeing this also with Node. You're seeing this with some other players that are still trying to get established. And I would say that's good news, because that means that actually co-living really is a form of living, and it's not tied to an age. It really isn't. So that's a trend. I think that's a good trend. And then I would say that that's a major trend right now. There's a lot of micro trends happening. For example, more and more co-living operators creating micro units instead of like shared apartments. More and more, I'm seeing also more and more like private individuals, or sometimes like entrepreneurs, people who want to get into entrepreneurship now, wanting to create co-living spaces.
One trend that I see a lot of people now willing to convert their smaller properties into co-living, because they see value in it. They see long-term cash flow, unlocking of long-term cash flow in it, which is really, really good, because I think that is what makes it. It's all about long tail, right? How big can big operators become? See, housing is a primary need for 7 billion people on this planet, and however organized the industry becomes, if the long tail, when I say long tail, if the general user is not building on this concept, when the general user starts building on this concept, that's where the actual unlocking of the value happens. And I think that's what has started happening in the co-living ecosystem. A lot of smaller players, 5, 10, 15 units, opening up their spaces, creating this as a cash flow tool for themselves, creating it as a lifestyle business. A lot of small and medium businesses, SMEs as we call them, are coming up in this ecosystem. They don't want to become big. They don't want to earn millions of dollars of funding. They don't want to raise funding. All they want to do is create something meaningful for people, have a strong community, live with those people, build human connections with those people. So I had one person from Switzerland that I spoke to last week, Octavio, and that guy, he lives alone. He has 5-bedroom apartment, and he has given other 4 rooms to different people from different age group, and he didn't know about co-living. So first time he learned about co-living on one of our webinars, the Q&A webinars that we do at the last Thursday of every month, and he came in one of those, and like he understood what he was actually doing was co-living, and then he came like, okay, I didn't know that what I was doing was co-living. I think that's a beautiful place to be in as an industry, because people are naturally gravitating towards it, and if the long tail starts doing it, that's where the volumetric effort, like impact, starts coming into the ecosystem. And I think that's one of the reason I am really excited about the incubator that we have built, that we can help people build lifestyle co-living businesses around the world. You don't have to become a big brand, but you can be a decent enough brand generating decent profits for yourself. You can actually retire with co-living as your lifestyle business. So I think that similar thing happened with retail when smaller retail shops started opening up 200, 300 years back, and then that became backbone. The retail shops became backbone of the country's economy, like around the world. Now I see that happening within real estate with co-living, and I think that's a trend that I would look out for. A lot of people, smaller spaces, lifestyle businesses. I think that's where I see co-living going.
I see that too, and I think you summarized it really well. And I think it's going to be now. We've seen that in co-working as well. There were like a few big players at the beginning, and it was important to have WeWork. But then what happened afterwards is that you've seen like a lot of like local co-workings popping up, right? They just don't want to scale. They're run by the owners, and everyone is having a blast. So I say yes to more small co-living, yes to more people that see it as an opportunity to invest, but also as an opportunity to create something good and nice. Meaningful.
Right. So on to the last part of this conversation, Guy. What's one advice that you would like to give to somebody who wants to start a co-living space? Right. What's that golden advice that you would like to give them?
Oh man, there's so many, but I guess if somebody wants to start a co-living space, I would be very clear on like what's their intention. Like what's your personal outcome here? Why are you doing this? What's your end goal? Because it's gonna make it easier to qualify what success means and how to get there. Because I'm also seeing how sometimes people come in and they're like, I want to impact whatever 100 million people in the next 5 years, and which is great as a mindset, but then it's maybe not realistic, right? So I think aligning your intentions, like really understanding, okay, first you need to understand like what are the finances behind co-living, when is it really profitable. You need around like 15 to 30 units for like one full-time employee, and this way you can get out of operations, and that's kind of where your first profitability point will be. And then knowing that, and then understanding, okay, is this something I want to get into, and if yes, like for which reasons, am I going to be satisfied with one place? Do I want to personally continue operating because it takes a lot of time and energy, or do I actually want to automate the operations? And knowing very clearly your intentions will help. Like we had, for example, one person in the incubator that their intention was to invest in real estate, create great products, but they were not interested in operations themselves, so they're going to find a partnership with an operator, right? So yeah, really starting with the intentions first, and then understanding the finances behind co-living so that you choose the model that's right for you based on how much energy you want to put in.
One thing that I tell people when somebody asks me if I have to give one single advice to somebody, I said, don't reinvent the wheel. There are enough people out there who have done enough, learned enough. You don't have to make the mistakes and learn. You can learn from other people or from their experiences, people who have been in the industry for the last decade. And I think that's something that people need to understand, that it's okay to take help. It's okay to, because there are thousands of decisions that you have to make in order to build a successful co-living business. And if you think that you can take those thousands of decisions completely on your own, then you're mistaken. Like, you will make some mistakes at some point that will cost you your time, that will cost you resources, money. If you want to avoid pitfalls, you can make newer mistakes. Like, all of us will continue to make mistakes and learn. So let's make some new mistakes. Let's not make old mistakes. Learn from what has happened at Common, Selena. Learn from people who have done it, and then grow from there. Because building on that will give you a launch pad, and the probability of your success increases drastically. So I think that's one thing that I would want people to leave with.
I think that's beautifully said, and I'm super aligned with you. I think there's some mistakes that still can be done. Like, we still have to innovate, we have to create new things, but we don't have to repeat the mistakes that were already done. Like these we don't, and you can save yourself a lot of time. And actually, that's one of the reasons also why, in retrospect, I really like the co-living community, is because we have a lot of co-living founders, employees, people that create co-living that are very open. Like, it's a very open industry, you know, compared to like other real estate industries where it's like really close and people don't spend much time and effort to actually connect with fellow peers and competitors. And in the co-living industry, we're seeing this a lot. So it's giving me hope, right? And that's why I'm seeing so many beautiful people wanting to create, sometimes dreams, sometimes business ideas, sometimes just great products and
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Guy, for taking our time today and speaking on this. I think there's a lot of value in it for people who listen to it. So we have Art of Coliving book that you can go on and buy it on our website. We have an incubator program that we have launched where we are helping co-living businesses and the co-living founders become better at running and scaling and building sustainable co-living businesses. And then we have a bunch of free resources. We have redone our website recently, so you can go on the website and find all those resources. I'll also tag those resources in the description of this video. Thanks a lot. Stay tuned. A lot more of interesting conversations are coming up. So I'll see you soon.